What's up, guys? Welcome to Swole Town. Today we're going to talk about why I'm really tired of the whole science-based training movement that's going on in fitness, why I think it's probably hurting a lot of you guys' gains, and why it's harmful in part to the fitness industry in a lot of ways. Now, before you jump into the comments and go to war for your favorite science-based influencer, just hear me out. Let me make a few points, and then if you want to jump in the comments, we can have a discussion. I want to be clear that I'm not making this content or ever making any content to put anyone down or to smash anyone else's ideas. People can do what they want, but I'm really passionate about the space. I've been training for decades. I've been coaching for over 12 years. So this is something I'm passionate about and I love, and that's why I'm talking about it. So I'm gonna start with a recent post on Instagram by Dante Trudel. You guys know I love Dante. Everything he puts out seems to just really hit the nail on the head. And this one was no different. So I'm not gonna read the whole post. I'm just gonna quote him here. And what he said was, every time they need a sledgehammer, they're looking for needle nose pliers. And what Dante means here is really important. What he's alluding to, what he's saying, is that people have forgotten like the fundamentals and the basics and how simple the shit really is. Training is not rocket science, right? It's not brain surgery. It's not quantum mechanics. It's training. People have been doing it for so many decades successfully that all this science has suddenly come along and people think it's like the best thing that's ever happened to fitness. But most of it is really not that practically relevant to training. And honestly, it's not really that useful to most people's training. When people should be focusing on doing heavy rows, heavy presses, compound movements, and progressing those big lifts over a year, 2 years. Instead, they're doing these fancy exercises with Bosu balls and like weird angles on the cable rows and all kinds of weird shit. Right? They're foregoing all the stuff that will build a solid foundation and really make them grow over time. Basically just progressive overload on big compound movements, like it's always been done, keeping it simple, is what has built so many amazing physiques over the years. And people today think that all this science stuff is gonna give them some fast track, some route to do things better, when in reality what they're doing is trying to mow the lawn with a pair of scissors when a freaking lawnmower is sitting right next to you waiting to be used. I'm not saying you can't use accessory exercises and target certain muscles and this and that. Of course you can. Can you target the teres muscle or the middle traps with a 15-pound dumbbell? Probably. Is that gonna make those muscle groups bigger than the guy doing 300-pound rows for reps? No. Now, diving a little bit deeper into this, we can get into like the actual use of all these studies and research that they're always pushing. It's always pushing the same variables. It's always about volume. It's always about intensity and reps in reserve, frequency. All the variables that they keep studying and pushing out there has led people to believe that those are actually the variables that matter the most. But are they? I don't think that they are. In my opinion, things like training volume and intensity, yeah, they matter, but they're almost an afterthought to way more important variables in your training that people are just totally bypassing and skipping to get into all this shit that's being pushed on them, believing that those things are actually the most important variables when they're probably not the most important variables for you. You know, what's your training history? What's your personal body and structure like? What movements work really well for you? These studies might be using a back squat, but maybe a back squat is a dog shit movement for you that's not gonna work that well. So I say it's way more important for you to experiment on yourself as an individual, as a lifter first. That matters way more. Finding the lifts that are optimal for your structure, the angles that are optimal for your body and structure, and finding big compound lifts that work really well for you, and then hammering those out for a really long time and adding plates to the bar. It's great that you're doing the most science-based training split and the most science-based amount of volume, but like, what can you demonstrate that that's done for you over time? So I would look at variables like, what's your training history as a lifter? Are you a beginner? Do you have a year, 5 years, 10 years? What are your goals? Like, have you actually sat down and defined exactly what your goal is in the gym? What's your structure like, your body? What lifts and movements work really optimally for you? Have you even taken the time to figure that out? Or are you just using these supposedly science-based movements that are the best because they may not be the best for you? This is one of the granddaddy laws of training. It's the principle of individual differences. Every single person has to discover these things in the gym for themselves. You can't rely on some fucking textbook or some study and some research to tell you that this movement is better than that movement, or this many sets is better than that many sets. It's literally irrelevant. So what if a study said 10 sets of chest is optimal? That has literally no bearing on what's optimal for you. You know nothing about the people in that study. How hard were they really training? What lift were they using? Was it a lift that was optimal for their structure? Almost every single one of these studies is so limited that when I read through it, I almost always deem most of them as practically completely irrelevant to training. Now, of course, this is not to say that the science is completely irrelevant or it doesn't matter or you shouldn't know it. Like any serious coach should know most of the science. And you, if you're a serious lifter or you're training for any sport or anything, you should know the science. Like it can be useful. It's good to know, but you have to be able to pick these studies and this research apart and actually decide for yourself if it's actually practically relevant based on the way the study was designed, all the variables used, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm telling you that most of the time, it's really not. Now, what I think really has happened, and the reason why I say like science-based may be harmful to the industry overall, is because science-based, the term itself, has become a branding tool. So many of these influencers, I mean, you could search on YouTube right now, science-based. You'll get like hundreds of videos. Everything's fucking science-based. The most science-based leg workout, the most science-based chest workout, the most science-based training split. Who fucking cares? It doesn't matter for you at all. At best, if you really reviewed all the science-based shit and you decided, hey, that looks really interesting, like maybe that's accurate, it might give you a starting point or somewhere to look and target and say, that seems to work for a lot of people. Maybe that's where I can start out. But you're still not gonna land there. Like you're gonna end up doing a little bit more, a little bit less. You might use completely different movements. A different training split might be optimal for you. You know, how old are you? Do you have kids? Do you have a busy life? Is that 6-day training split really gonna be great for you? Probably not. So basically, these influencers have kind of rigged the system a little bit. Now everything has to be science-based. They have to talk about these specific variables being the most important. But look back like 20, 30 years, people were still getting fucking jacked. Look at the golden era bodybuilders, powerlifters. They had none of this science shit and they were still absolute monsters. And they were doing a lot of the stuff already because through trial and error and experimentation, they found what works without some textbook. Like people have been talking about a lot of this stuff like stretch mediated hypertrophy, lengthened partials. All this stuff was already known to guys 20, 30 years ago. So they basically monopolized the whole science-based shit. And now they use it to sell you a bunch of expensive shit like programs and training and courses on all the science and stuff like that. And do you really need it? Well, I don't know. I can't speak for you. But personally, I say you probably don't need it. You need to get in the gym, find the big lifts that work for you and hammer those fucking lifts out for a solid year or two. Like really grow on just a small subset of big important lifts. Leave the fancy accessory shit if you enjoy doing that for afterwards. And of course, what's always been true in the fitness industry is that simple, basic, true shit doesn't sell. It's not sexy, but what really works, like 95% of what works isn't sexy at all when it comes to training. It's just not sexy. You might even say it's boring. I don't think it's boring because I love this shit and I've been around it for so long. But to a newer lifter, looking at listening to someone talk and say, man, you just need to do these lifts and like get really good at them for the next year or more. They don't want to hear that shit. They want to hear, hey, I have this brand new science-based program. It's based on the most recent research. It's guaranteed to get you jacked in way less time. And then they find themselves doing all this bullshit in the gym. So in a way, the science, it's become almost reductionist. Like it reduces training to these specific variables that they say are important. Volume, intensity, frequency, a couple other things that they just constantly go back and forth and people argue to death about this stuff. And obviously those variables matter. I'm just saying there's probably more important variables for you as a lifter to consider before you even worry about that shit. And of course, this has even infiltrated the nutrition side of the equation. People are arguing to death over the optimal amount of protein and the optimal amount of calories and this and that. It's fucking crazy. People have known how to get huge and strong for so long. It's not fucking quantum mechanics, man. Like it's not that complicated. If you're eating 3,000 calories and you haven't gained a pound in this whole month, like you probably need to eat more. Add 500 calories to your diet. If you're getting 1 gram per pound of body weight and protein, your bases are covered. Like there's no need to make it complicated. But people love the flashy stuff. They love to cling to polar extremes. You have all these crazy diets now that everyone says is optimal. The keto, the fucking carnivore, the paleo, the this, the that. People have known how to eat properly for this shit for so long. Like stop making it complicated. We don't need any more research on it, honestly. Maybe with nutrition as far as like longevity, curing diseases and stuff, that's really interesting. But just for getting bigger and stronger, like it's not fucking complicated. I swear it's not. I really just think that most of this science-based stuff and all the research, it's just not that practically relevant. The ceiling is very low on how relevant it is to your training. So I urge you guys, like if you're a beginner lifter, man, like go into the gym with the mindset of finding lifts that work well for you, that you feel good with, that are compound, that you're working a lot of muscle, and that you can progress for a long time. Like grind on those lifts. Don't get dragged into all the fancy science-based weird shit. You do not need it. Now on that note, I will say, like in the gym, you have to find things that you really love. And if the science-based stuff or doing like all kinds of weird accessory exercises, like if that's what gets you up in the morning and gets you into the gym, then have at it, man. Like I said, I'm not trying to throw shade on people. I'm just expressing my opinion because I love the space and I want to see people do really well. Like I want to see people excel in the gym, and it kills me when I walk into the gym and I see some fucking teenager, some skinny teenager doing some weird cable lat exercise. Like stop going for the shit you saw on Instagram or TikTok that your favorite science-based guy said is optimal. It's not optimal. The dude can't even do a pull-up. Like he can barely pull like 90 pounds in the lat pull down. Like do the lat pull down, man. Do the pull-up. Stop it with the weird cable exercises. So it's just my opinion. Put your head down and grind on simple. Find what works for you. Worry about these other variables after. It's a process. You got the principle of individual differences. It tells you that everyone's different. Everyone has to kind of experiment and find what works for them. It may be a high intensity approach for you. Maybe doing a shit ton of volume. Maybe you really are a genetic volume whore. Like maybe some people really are like that. But you're never gonna know until you start putting yourself into the fire. Stop letting other people tell you what to do and get in the gym and grind on simple. All right, I'm curious on you guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching my content. It means a lot to me. If you like this video, or even if you hated it, subscribe anyway. We'll have plenty more chances to discuss this stuff. Like and subscribe. Thanks for being here, man. See you next time.